Hi, welcome to Playful Preschool. This week is all about apples. And I'm Amanda from the Educator Spin on It, and we have Jody from Growing Book by Book here with us tonight as well.
Hello.
We are starting off with an apple theme because it is fall and back to school, and apples are a wonderful theme of learning. And I think preschoolers can relate to apples because they're in the fridge. We do a lot of snacks with apples, and they're healthy, so parents like us appreciate that. There's a whole bunch of apple-themed preschool activities, so we're only going to touch on a couple tonight. Jody actually has a great book that they've been reading with her children. You want to tell us about it?
I do. We have been reading over and over and over and over Annie by Monica Wellington. And this is for preschoolers, even toddlers, because I have a toddler at home too, but very bright, colorful illustrations. And one of the things that I really like about it is that the farmer in the story is actually a woman. We often think of farmers as being the men, but a woman farmer who has an apple orchard, and she picks all sorts of things out of the apples, apple cider, muffins, cakes, and applesauce from the apple farm all the way to the farmer's market where she sells her apples there. And you get to watch her travel in her truck. My kids love, they go over the bridge and where she sells her things. And then there's a story at her apple orchard. In fact, we're going to read it with a group of neighborhood kids next week at our story time, so I'm really looking forward to that. So there's lots and lots about apples, but this is one of our favorites.
That does sound like a good book. We just did a big social studies activity where we talked about how the apples get from the orchard to our table, because I think it's oftentimes we forget that they don't just show up in the fridge, that they're harvested and they get picked and they get transferred to a facility where they are cleaned and processed and usually packaged, and then they go to another storage facility, and then somebody or a company purchases them, and then they go in a big truck to a store, and then we go to the store and pick them up. So I actually think that this story would be a fantastic connection for the literacy activity that we did.
Yeah, that would be a great pick. In fact, we even started your activity today. We started making our apple orchard.
Well, yeah, it connects perfectly together. So what we did is we just use a back of a cereal box, and I used the regular cardboard as the trunk, and my preschooler tried to start rolling it up, and his fine motor skills just aren't, I don't know, they're not as refined, so I had to help tape, but he helped me cut. I usually don't say let 4-year-olds cut cardboard because it's so hard, but he's a big cutter. He loves it. And then I had him help me hole punch it. I don't know if you can see.
Mm-hmm.
These are like hole punched, and the reason we did it funky is because then you can actually stick the pom-pom in and it'll stay. So that way they harvested their own apples, and then they put them on the little Fisher-Price wagon, just like that story you were saying.
Right.
They could bring it to the packing facility. It was kind of cute.
And I have 2 boys, so my 2 boys got all of their tractors out, and so they were pretending to drive the people out to the orchard to pick the apples, and so it turned into this whole car and truck fight, which is pretty much what everything turns into at our house. But yeah, they had fun. Plus, we had just gone apple picking this weekend, so it's been great that they got that real world experience, and now we're doing a lot of apple activities this week that they can relate it back to being at the apple orchard this weekend, which I think is really important to give those real life experiences.
Mm-hmm. And for us, we're kind of doing it the opposite. We're hopefully going to go apple picking next weekend. So we're trying to do the activities beforehand, so that
Hmm.
way once he gets there, he's like, oh yeah, that's right. This is like an apple orchard, and this is what my mom was talking about.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to go back again because we've already used our whole supply of apples. So.
Oh my goodness, that's so funny. Well, and another activity like that I think works really well with apples for us is that it's the short sound for A. So apple is a lot of times used when you're describing like beginning sounds for A. And so like this week we made a list of words that started with that short vowel sound. And Jody and I were talking earlier. I have a 4-year-old who this is very much something we talk about. And then I have the 1-year-old who is like, yeah, I want to write. And he actually says, write, write, and grabs the markers and takes all the caps off and writes all over everything. So we're often asked, like, how do you manage preschool with a 4-year-old and while still keeping the one-year-old entertained, or 2-year-old or toddler? And Jody, you've got another little one too. So I guess I just let him write and participate as much as he can. And yeah, it doesn't maybe look pretty to you or I, but he is writing and he's starting to make a list. So I'm like, yeah, that is great. Thanks for writing, Apple.
Absolutely, I totally agree.
And now, what do you end up doing with your boys?
So we've done several things, but the one that we kind of featured today is we made, or I kind of drew an apple tree, and on the trunk we put a letter that we were working on. And I actually used the letters in my son's name. My 4-year-old can identify all the letters of the alphabet, but so now we're kind of working on which letters or make up his name and getting them in the correct order. So what we did is we made an apple tree for each letter in his name, and I did a kind of a sample one here, but originally what we did is I kind of drew the outline and let him color in. His fine motor skills still need a lot of work, so he worked on coloring in the trunk of the tree and then also the top of the tree. So then in the trunk of the tree, I put the letter that we were working on, in this case it's the letter K, and then up in the green part of the tree, I put random letters, but I made sure I put the focus letter at least 3 times up above. And so that what we did after we had our apple snack, we kind of chopped off the 4 sides of our apples so that we just had our core left, and this became our little stamp to paint our apples on our tree. So it was a great way to just kind of recycle from our snack a little bit. So we simply dipped in red paint, and he had to find all the letter K's and stamp them on the sheet, and those made the apples on the tree. If you have a child that has a real short name, you can kind of usually do it in one sitting. My son's name's a little bit longer, so we actually did it in a couple of sittings. And then we practiced just putting the letters all in order, and we created a little apple orchard. So there's a lot of different ways you can kind of differentiate with this. If you have a child who does know all the letters of their alphabet, another thing you could do is change the font. So if you were doing the letter K, find it in a couple of different fonts, print it out on paper and just cut those out. It's a little more challenging that way if you do have a child that already can identify their letters. So that was just one of the activities we've done so far this week, but they really enjoyed that one. And then they, of course, went back and stamped lots and lots of apples on their tree, but that's fine. That's what an apple orchard is.
And actually, I saw that and I was like, oh, and if there's a child who knows their alphabet already, you can easily just do a sight word and do 4 or 5 different sight words, or even word families. You can, in the tree trunk, put the word family at, and then have them stamp all the words in the tree that have an at. So I love it.
Yeah, or even doing letter sounds. If they can identify their letters, one of the things that we're working on right now are identifying the letter sound. So just saying the letter sound as they stamp it, so making that connection between the sound and the letter that represents it too. So lots of ways to vary it.
Yes, and I think that stamping is something like my preschoolers are very hands-on minds-on kind of kid, so the actual movement of stamping that letter would maybe help reinforce those letters for him.
Right.
So, and we had done just really quick, and again, we had a toddler helping with us, so things have been pre-colored or colored again. But this one, we just did a handprint tree where you trace your hand, and then we're working on drawing circles, like you were saying, trying to develop that fine motor. And so going around and around and around and around is a great pre-writing, and then making them even tinier, kind of letting them go big, and then at the end doing small. And so that was reinforcing some of our pre-writing and working on drawing circles. And then my preschooler does not know all of his letter names yet, so we're trying to, if we do a little craft, somehow add in a letter in some way so that he's exposed to it as much as possible. So we just said, you know, put the letters on the bottom.
I love that. We're going to do that tomorrow because we need help with the circle motion and all of that. So I love that. We're going to do that tomorrow.
And you know what? Even if you had paint and you could smear it in the circle. And just sit and smear it. But I think with the markers, you have to go around a lot of time.
Right.
I mean, then at least that lasts 5 minutes of activity. Whereas my kids go, I was telling Jody earlier, they found the tool, and they were wrapping it in balls, and they were pushing it like around their hands, and then they were pushing the bottom through to make the stem of the apples. And then my kids had a little bit of an apple fight, and they were like tossing them around the living room, and then they got the big, I have some bushel baskets out, and so they made a whole bunch of their apples, and they were doing like a basketball apple bushel toss, and it was a lot of fun. Trying to, you know, get some movement into the learning as well.
It's a great one too.
And then I just had one last thing that we had worked on this week as we were talking, like the circles. My 4-year-old, we're still working on the circles, but we were painting together. And with preschoolers, it's easier to go big. A lot of times, like, I kind of forget that because I also have an 8-year-old. And so she can work with, you know, a half sheet of paper, a full sheet of paper. But, you know, 4-year-olds just need big for their hands and that motion. And so we just went big, and I said, okay, take your pencil and draw a big circle. And then we went and I gave him a whole bunch of red paint, and I taught him how first you have to outline it, and then you have to paint it on the inside. And then I told him you could add a stem. And I thought it turned out really cute. So now I have to figure out what I'm going to do with it.
I love it.
I think I'm going to put it
in your kitchen.
You know, I would, but I don't have any space. My little kids' couches are red, so I think I might put it like next to our reading nook, like right above the red couches.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that'd be neat too.
Well, anyways, do you have any other Apple activities that have been a hit with your boys this week?
Like we have been doing, well, I closed my window. It's hanging on our window. That's our little display area. So again, we've made some more apple trees, but this time we just took, well, here, I can grab it real quick. Grab some construction paper. Sorry, here we go. So what I did, again, we did the tree, and this was actually him coloring in this time, so you can kind of see how he still needs work with, we're still working on that fine motor stuff. A lot of his is just still scribble, but that's okay. And so then I wrote his name down here, and then we had little apples with the letters of their name, and they were all mixed up, and so he had to kind of do a matching. He had to look at the first letter, then find the apple, and then a little glue dot, and we glued it on the tree. So it was, then he'd have to look at the second letter and find the apple and put it up here. So I did this with him, and my 2-year-old, we even kind of adapted it for him too, where I guided him a lot more and helping to find the letters to just name the letters, because that's what he's working on. But my oldest son was able to find the letters, and then it was just up to him to get them in the correct order and glue them on. So we've been doing a lot of apple/name activities this week.
Oh my gosh, I love it. I want to do every single one of those. I wish we were closer so you could just like prep all your activities double and just hand them over to me.
I would love that.
Nice.
We're just probably 1,000 miles from each other, but sure, we can do that.
Which is what's great about the internet. So on both Growing Book by Book and the Educator Spin on it, as well as our Playful Preschool blogging team, we all have different activities that you can come and visit and find their directions to. They're all geared for ages 3 to 5. Of course, they can be adapted to meet individual child's needs, you know, whether it's more advanced or needing more parent and teacher support. So we'd love to have you visit us, and stay tuned for next week. We will be posting every Wednesday a collection of free preschool activities, and then that same evening we will be sharing with you a live hangout on how we do that and I guess what works for us that week. So thanks for coming.
Thank you.